Candace adjusted her mic and smiled wide, the kind of smile that looks polished, practiced, like it's been worn 1,000 times before in interviews where she already knew the ending. She leaned forward in her chair, confident, certain, ready to control the room like she always does. Her tone was sweet, but sharp. "Let's be honest," she said, her eyes locked on Jasmine. "People like you thrive on division. You build careers off victimhood." The room didn't move. Not a breath. Jasmine didn't blink. She didn't flinch. She just stared back, calm, composed. And for a moment, that silence screamed louder than anything Candace had said. Then Jasmine leaned forward, just a few inches, just enough to make the smile on Candace's face falter. Her voice was low, even, but there was steel behind it. "People like me?" she asked. "You mean people who don't get the luxury of pretending racism ended just because it stopped knocking on your door?" Candace shifted in her seat. The smile twitched, but stayed. "No one's pretending," she said quickly, brushing off the comment like dust. "We're just not making excuses." Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't move. She just delivered it like truth wrapped in glass. "You filed a racial harassment complaint in high school, Candace. You said you were targeted, scared, that the school didn't protect you. And you were right to speak up." Candace blinked. "I'm not judging you," Jasmine continued. "I'm reminding you, because now you're sitting here acting like the same fear you once lived through is fake when it's not yours." Candace opened her mouth, but the words didn't come fast enough. Her hand brushed the mic like it needed adjusting again, but really, she was stalling. "That was a long time ago," she finally muttered. "I've moved on." Jasmine leaned back, nodded slowly. "Good. You moved on. But not everyone has that option. Not everyone gets to turn the page and forget the chapter ever happened." There it was. A crack. Candace's jaw tightened. "I'm saying people need to take responsibility. Like I did." "You're saying people should stay quiet," Jasmine replied. "Like you didn't." The tension in the room snapped like a stretched wire. Someone on the crew dropped something. A paper? A pen? No one even looked. They were locked in. "Is that why you erased your own story?" Jasmine asked. "Because it didn't fit the brand?" Candace's eyes narrowed. "That's not fair." "It's not fair," Jasmine said, her voice rising just a breath. "That you used your pain to get justice, but now you tell others that their pain is imaginary." Candace tried to speak again, but the words tangled. Her smile was gone now. Not because Jasmine took it, but because it couldn't hold under the weight of what she'd buried. And then Jasmine said it, quiet, steady, like a final sentence in a courtroom. "You didn't overcome racism by denying it. You overcame it by naming it. And now you want others to stay silent. That's not strength, Candace. That's fear dressed up in confidence." That's when the room changed. The cameras didn't cut. The audience didn't clap. They just watched Candace sit there, realizing this wasn't going to end like the others. This wasn't one of her shows. This wasn't her script. Jasmine had brought the receipts, and now everyone could see the fine print. And Candace? She couldn't hide from what she'd written. She leaned forward and said, "Let's be honest, Jasmine. People like you thrive on division. You build careers off victimhood." It was sharp, rehearsed, and loud enough to echo through the studio like she was throwing the first punch with a smile. Candace knew what she was doing, turning pain into a punchline, trying to paint herself as the survivor and Jasmine as the problem. The camera caught her eyes, cold and steady, like she'd been waiting to say this. Waiting for the moment she could flip the table and make herself the victim of someone else's truth. Jasmine didn't blink. She sat still, too still. Because when someone takes your story and twists it, you don't flinch, you focus. She didn't interrupt. She didn't look away. She just watched Candace pile on the words, trying to bury everything real under a smooth sentence meant for clips and clicks. And when the silence came after, it was thick, heavy. The kind of silence that demands an answer, but Jasmine didn't give her one right away. She let the weight of it sit. Let everyone watching feel just how far Candace was willing to go to keep her image clean, even if it meant wiping away every truth that didn't match the mirror she wanted. Jasmine looked at her, calm. Not calm like she didn't care, but calm like someone who had already seen the game being played and wasn't about to play by its rules. Her hands didn't move. Her voice didn't rise. She just stared. The kind of stare that doesn't challenge you to fight, it challenges you to tell the truth. Candace shifted, just slightly. Maybe she didn't expect that silence to hit so hard. Maybe she was used to people either yelling back or backing down. But Jasmine did neither. She just looked at her like a mirror, one that refused to bend, one that forced Candace to see herself fully. "You know," Jasmine finally said, soft and slow, "there was a time you believed in something bigger than yourself, before the cameras, before the clicks, when you were 17 and scared, and you asked for help, and the system flawed and broken as it has answered you. And you were right to ask. You were right to be afraid. But now you sit here and tell kids who are scared that they're weak, that they're lying, that they're making it up. How do you live with that?" Her voice didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't blink. And for the first time all night, Candace didn't have a quick comeback. Because Jasmine wasn't just talking to her anymore. She was talking to every viewer who had ever been dismissed. Everyone who had ever swallowed their pain because someone louder called it fake. She didn't need to shout. She just told the truth. And in that moment, the room didn't feel like a studio. It felt like a courtroom. And Candace Owens, for all her talking, suddenly looked like someone running out of things to say. Candace opened her mouth, but no words came out. The silence wrapped around her like a spotlight, bright and unrelenting. She reached for a stat, a story, anything that could reset the balance. But nothing landed. Jasmine didn't interrupt. She just watched, unbothered, like a woman who had already decided that she didn't need to win the room. Just reveal it. Cameras kept rolling. Producers didn't dare cut to commercial. Even the moderator sat frozen, unsure whose side he was supposed to be on anymore. So Candace tried again. "You don't get it," she said, her voice tighter now, the smile gone. "People need to stop blaming the system and start taking responsibility for their own lives." But it didn't land. Not this time. Because Jasmine didn't flinch, didn't raise a brow. She just let that sentence hang in the air like a trap that had already been triggered. Then Jasmine leaned in aggressively, not with heat, but with clarity. "You filed a complaint," she said. "You asked for protection. You said the system failed you. And it did. And you were right. But you didn't overcome that moment by pretending it didn't happen. You overcame it because someone believed you, because someone fought for you. And now you use that story like it was someone else's. You, people like me," she said. "You mean people who don't get the luxury of pretending it's not happening?" Her voice didn't shake, but it sliced through the air like it was built from something heavier than sound something lived. "Because let me tell you what people like me have to carry. We carry fear in our pockets like spare change. We memorize where the exits are. We learn how to shrink our voices in meetings, how to smile when someone says something that burns, how to breathe through a traffic stop without letting our hands shake. That's what people like me do." She leaned forward, now not aggressive, not loud, just close enough that the truth couldn't be ignored. "You built a brand off the idea that we're imagining it. That if we just worked harder, smiled bigger, dressed better, we'd be fine. But people like me have done all that. And still we've been followed in stores. Still we've been denied jobs. Still we've been pulled over and prayed not to be misunderstood." Candace opened her mouth, maybe to fire back. But Jasmine didn't let the pause linger. "You get to sit here now and act like the system works because once it worked for you. But the fact that you needed it, that you filed that complaint, that you asked for justice, proves my point. The problem is, you got out and now you've decided the fire's no longer burning just because you're not in it." The room didn't move. Not a cough, not a shift in the seat. Because Jasmine wasn't making noise. She was making the truth impossible to avoid. Jasmine tilted her head just slightly. "Excuses?" she repeated, like the word tasted wrong. "You think it's an excuse to be scared when someone follows you through a parking lot at night? You think it's an excuse when a mother teaches her son how to survive a traffic stop before she teaches him how to drive? You think it's an excuse when someone changes their name on a resume just to get called back?" She didn't blink. "You call it an excuse because it never followed you home. But it followed me. It followed people I know. It showed up when we were 12, walking to school, and a cop car slowed down for no reason. It showed up when someone locked their car door just because we walked past. It shows up in boardrooms, in classrooms, in courtrooms, and now you sit here pretending the only thing holding us back is our mindset?" Jasmine leaned in now, not for drama, but because the air between them had shrunk with the weight of what she was about to say. "You want to talk about excuses? You filed a legal complaint, Candace. You wrote your fear down, signed your name to it, and asked someone to protect you. That wasn't an excuse. That was truth. That was pain. That was courage. But now, you shame others for doing the same thing. You call it weakness. The cameras didn't cut. No one moved. Jasmine's voice was quiet, but it hit like a storm. It's not that people are making excuses, Candace. It's that people are tired of pretending nothing's wrong, while everything burns. She didn't flinch, didn't raise it. Her tone was the same as it had been from the start, measured. Calm. The kind of calm that doesn't come from being quiet, but from choosing not to scream. You think this is about left or right? Jasmine said. But it's not. It's about memory. About people like my grandfather who was denied a bank loan in his own city. About the kids I see today who already know how to shrink themselves before middle school so they don't get labeled. You think it's some political game? It's not a game when it's your life. Candace opened her mouth, but Jasmine wasn't finished. You think strength is pretending the past didn't happen? But real strength? Real strength is walking back into a room where people once ignored your pain and telling the truth anyway. And not because you want applause. Not because it's easy. But because if you don't, someone else might think their story doesn't matter. That their silence is survival. She turned slightly, not toward the moderator, not even toward Candace, but toward the viewers. Like she knew exactly who needed to hear her next words. You call it victimhood. I call it reality. And the day we stop telling the truth about that reality is the day we lose more than a debate, we lose each other. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The weight of her words dropped like a stone into the silence. You filed a racial harassment complaint in high school, Candace. That wasn't an excuse. That was your truth. You said you feared for your safety, that the school failed to protect you. And the system you say doesn't exist responded. They listened. They acted. You got justice. She paused, but not to let it land. She paused because it already had. So help me understand, Jasmine continued, locking eyes with her. How do you go from pleading for protection to mocking those who do the same? You didn't just file that complaint, Candace. You won. You asked for help and they believed you. That belief saved you. And now you sit on this platform and tell others they should stay silent? That asking for help is weakness? You stood on the shoulders of those who fought before you, and now you're kicking the ladder away for everyone else trying to climb. Candace shifted, but the room didn't. Jasmine's voice cut through every defense like glass through still water. You didn't overcome racism by denying it. You overcame it because you had the courage to name it. But now, you've turned that courage into denial, and that's not growth. That's betrayal. You could feel it shift. The tension didn't just sit in the air, it pressed against every wall, heavy and unmoving. The camera crew stopped adjusting their angles. The moderator blinked twice but said nothing. Even the viewers at home on couches, at kitchen tables, in cars streaming the show leaned closer without realizing it. Candace's face didn't move, but her hand fidgeted with her mic cord, just barely. And Jasmine? She was still, unbothered. Her words had landed like a judge's gavel final, loud even in silence. No one expected that line, not from her. Not so calm, not so surgical. It didn't feel like a debate anymore. It felt like something sacred had been cracked open, something that couldn't be shoved back inside. It wasn't just a blink, it was a flicker of something she couldn't hide. The first sign that her grip was slipping. Her eyes darted for a second, not toward Jasmine, but toward the moderator, the lights, the cameras, anywhere but the woman sitting across from her. She opened her mouth like a comeback was forming, but nothing came out. The silence dragged, just long enough to expose the crack in her confidence. Her polished persona, built on control and certainty, trembled under the weight of her own past being read aloud. She wasn't ready for that. She had mastered interviews, dominated sound bites, but this was truth, not theater. And the worst part? It was her own truth she had tried to forget. The truth she never expected to be brought back to the surface, especially not so gently, especially not so powerfully. Jasmine didn't move. She didn't need to. Her silence said more than any argument could. Then, softly but firmly, she replied, "You didn't move on, Candace. You moved away from it. You took your pain, buried it, and now you're telling everyone else theirs doesn't count?" Candace sat straighter, visibly rattled. "I grew up," she snapped. Jasmine nodded slowly, never raising her voice. "But growing up doesn't mean growing cold. You once needed someone to listen. Now you roll your eyes when others speak. That's not growth, that's erasure. The moderator shifted uncomfortably. Cameras zoomed in. The tension had ripened into something heavier than debate. This wasn't about ideology anymore. It was about betrayal of truth, of experience, of a younger self who once cried out for justice. And Jasmine had just put that betrayal in the spotlight, with no drama, just the facts. The entire room could feel it. This wasn't a clapback. It was a reckoning. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Just leaned in like someone tired of watching people twist stories into shields. Her eyes locked on Candace's. You were 17. You said students targeted you. Said the school ignored you. Said you feared for your safety. And you were right. But now you sit on national platforms and tell young black kids they're imagining things when you, Candace, were the proof it wasn't imagined at all. Candace tried to cut in, but Jasmine didn't stop. You used the system when it protected you. You believed in accountability when it benefited you. But now you call it weakness because it doesn't fit the brand you built? The air in the room shifted something between disbelief and realization. It wasn't just a contradiction Jasmine had exposed, it was a transformation that sold out the truth for applause. Candace's smile faded for the first time. She didn't just look challenged. She looked seen. Candace opened her mouth, but Jasmine kept going, her voice steady, her words cutting with precision. You say you've moved on, like pain has an expiration date. But what about the kid getting profiled on his walk home? The mother praying her son comes back from a traffic stop alive? The girl scared to speak up in school because she knows they'll say she's making it up? Jasmine's tone didn't rise, but it hit harder than a shout. You got justice and called it strength. But now you deny others the right to even name what they're going through. That's not strength. That's erasure. The moderator shifted in his seat, uncomfortable. The crew stopped moving. Candace wasn't smiling now, because Jasmine wasn't debating. She was testifying. And every viewer watching felt it in their chest. Jasmine didn't flinch. She let the words hang for a second, like smoke in the air. Then she leaned forward, her eyes locked on Candace. Do something? She repeated, quiet but piercing. You mean like filing a racial complaint because your school failed to protect you? Like asking the system to step in when you were scared and alone? You did something. You stood up back then. But now, when someone else stands up, you call it whining. Her voice didn't shake. You got help and called it justice. But now you tell others to sit down and suffer in silence. That's not doing something, Candace. That's forgetting who you were the minute you got safe. Candace's mouth tensed. She tried to speak, but the truth was louder. And in that moment, the power in the room shifted for good. She didn't need to. Her stillness said more than shouting ever could. The weight of what she'd just said hovered over the room like a verdict. Every camera stayed fixed. Every breath on set felt like it was being held. Jasmine's eyes didn't leave Candace, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Her silence wasn't hesitation, it was control. While Candace squirmed in her seat, shifting slightly, eyes darting to the moderator for help that didn't come, Jasmine remained grounded, unmoved, like someone who had been here before, who had nothing left to prove and everything left to protect. And that's what shook Candace more than any words ever could. Jasmine wasn't reacting. She was watching, waiting, holding the truth steady. And the moment those words left her mouth, the air cracked. Jasmine didn't raise her voice, but it landed like thunder. Every syllable hit with the weight of memory and truth. I am doing something, she said again, slower this time, letting it sink in. I'm sitting in this chair, speaking on this stage, refusing to let the same silence you once broke become the silence you now defend. Her hands were still in her lap, but her words were marching now. Straight through the cracks Candace had tried to seal shut. You taught us how to speak up when we're hurting. And now, you want us to whisper? The audience was still. Even the moderator, who had been shifting uncomfortably for minutes, looked frozen. Jasmine leaned forward, eyes locked. You can't light a fire in your youth and spend the rest of your life pretending the burn never happened. Candace blinked fast. There was no quick comeback this time. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't even blink. She just let the words hang there like smoke from a fire that had nowhere to go. Then, calm as ever, she said, You're right. I don't know you now. I only know the girl who once begged a system to hear her cry, who wrote it down, counted it, documented every word so it wouldn't be ignored. The silence grew heavy. But the woman sitting here, she's telling the next generation to swallow the same pain she couldn't carry alone. Jasmine leaned in slightly, voice still soft but cutting deep. I don't need to know you now, Candace, because your silence is louder than your story, and what you deny someone else is still surviving. The air in the room tightened. Even the cameras felt closer. Candace opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time, she looked unsure, because Jasmine wasn't attacking. She was reminding. And that, somehow, hurt more. Candace's lips parted, like she had something ready, some rebuttal. Some spin, but nothing came out. Jasmine kept going, her voice steady and raw. I know you filed a complaint when those words cut too deep. I know you wanted justice, and you were right to want it. You deserve to be heard. But what I don't understand is how the same mouth that once asked for help now tells others to stay silent. How the same girl who needed protection became the woman who mocks those still needing it. She leaned in, not aggressive, just honest. You used the system when it served you, Candace. And now you act like no one else should. That's not growth. That's forgetting who you were the second you stopped bleeding. The room was still, but not quiet because every person watching could feel the weight of it. And Candace, for a brief moment, looked like she remembered too. Candace shifted in her seat, eyes narrowing like she was searching for a way out. Jasmine didn't flinch. You had the privilege of someone listening when you cried out. You had adults, lawyers, a system that just for a moment took your fear seriously. And you turned that moment into strength. Good. But not everyone gets that chance, Candace. Some people scream for years and no one hears them. Some kids walk through the same fire and never get a settlement, they get silence. And now, instead of fighting for them, you mock them. You call their pain political, their fear performative. But what you're doing, right here, right now, it's erasing the very thing that once saved you. Candace opened her mouth, but Jasmine wasn't done. And you call that truth? No. That's betrayal dressed up as empowerment. Jasmine didn't wait. Her voice cut through, calm but louder than anything else in the room. No, what's not fair is being 17 and terrified, filing a complaint because you thought no one would believe you. What's not fair is being surrounded by people who told you it wasn't real until it happened to you. And now you stand on stages, in studios, with microphones and makeup, telling the next generation that what broke you never existed. That's not just unfair, Candace. That's dangerous. Because if someone had believed you a little less, protected you a little later, where would you be now? Would you be sitting here? Would you even feel safe walking into that studio? You survived it. But survival is not a permission slip to silence everyone who's still bleeding. Candace tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. Jasmine leaned forward again, eyes locked. So don't talk to me about fair. You knew the system was broken. You used it to get justice. And now you want to lock the door behind you? Jasmine cut in, firm now. Her tone didn't rise, but it carried more weight than shouting ever could. You don't get to rewrite your past just because it's inconvenient for your brand. You don't get to stand on a stage built from your pain and then tell others their pain doesn't count. You once said the system failed you, that it let threats slip through the cracks, that you felt unsafe in your own school. And you were right. But instead of using that truth to build something better, you've turned it into a weapon pointed, not at the problem, but at the people still stuck inside it. That's not strength, Candace. That's survival twisted into arrogance. And if you think power means pretending it never happened, then maybe you're not as healed as you claim to be. The room didn't breathe. Even the camera lights seemed dimmer. Candace blinked slowly, like she'd just been pulled into a conversation she didn't know how to end. What's not fair is being told to stay quiet about racism by someone who once cried it themselves. What's not fair is using your past for sympathy and denying others the same right. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Her words hit like a slow, heavy drumbeat, each one landing harder than the last. You think because you made it through, everyone else should tow without help, without protest, without speaking. But survival isn't proof that the system works. It's proof that someone fought like hell to make it out. And now you're telling others to shut up and be grateful for the scraps? No, that's not justice. That's betrayal wrapped in respectability. And the people watching this, they see it. They've lived it. And no soundbite is going to erase that truth. The crowd murmured. Someone clapped. Then another. It wasn't loud. Not yet, but it was real. A ripple cutting through the tension like sunlight through a storm. Candace shifted in her seat, suddenly aware of just how many eyes weren't blinking. Jasmine didn't turn to acknowledge the noise. She stayed locked in, steady. Her expression didn't gloat, it held space. Space for the truth, for the weight of every person who'd been told to swallow their pain quietly. This wasn't just a comeback. It was a crack in the mask, and the room felt it. Not just the words, but what they stood for, something raw, something overdue. Candace's hands trembled slightly. She tried to steady them beneath the table, but the moment had already shifted. The confidence she wore, like armor, had dents, now visible, undeniable. Her usual rhythm was gone, replaced by a pause that dragged just a second too long. She opened her mouth to speak, but found no footing, no clever pivot, no rehearsed line that could undo what just happened. Jasmine hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't made it personal. She had just held up a mirror, and Candace, for the first time in a long time, couldn't look away. "You're twisting my words," Candace said, her voice tight, almost pleading now, not with Jasmine, but with the room, with the cameras, with the viewers she could feel slipping through her fingers. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't need to twist anything. The truth was already laid bare, each line of dialogue etched with precision. The crowd wasn't confused. They weren't debating nuance. They were witnessing a reckoning, one that didn't need volume or vengeance to hit hard, just memory. And Jasmine had brought hers, sharpened by experience and unshaken by the spin. "No," Jasmine said. "I'm holding them up so you can see them clearly." Her voice didn't rise. Her posture didn't shift, but the weight behind her, words filled the room like thunder without sound. She wasn't arguing anymore. She was unveiling, unmasking. Everything Candace tried to frame as political theater was unraveling into something much harder to escape: truth. And truth doesn't need embellishment. It just needs to be seen. The audience wasn't looking at Jasmine for a comeback. They were looking at Candace for a response. But Candace had already lost the rhythm. This wasn't a debate. It was a mirror. And Jasmine wasn't afraid to hold it steady. Candace stood up, not to leave, not to protest, just to breathe. But even that looked like retreat. Her fingers gripped the edge of the table, as if steadying herself against the truth Jasmine had laid bare. The cameras didn't miss it. Neither did the crowd. Because it wasn't about volume anymore. It wasn't about who could talk over who. It was about what stayed in the room once the talking stopped. And as Candace stood there, the silence wasn't power. It was pressure. The weight of contradiction. The kind that doesn't explode, it sinks. Jasmine stayed seated, her gaze unwavering. Because sometimes, the strongest blow is the one that doesn't move. Jasmine didn't flinch. She watched Candace, not with fury, but with something deeper: disappointment. "You think this is about staying angry?" she said, her voice low but piercing. "This is about not letting the pain get buried under silence. This is about the people who don't get a seat at this table, who can't call out injustice on national TV, who are erased before they even speak." Her words weren't loud, but they struck like thunder. Anger isn't the problem. Denial is. And if calling that out makes me angry, then maybe more of us should be. The room didn't move. Even Candace stopped. Because Jasmine had done what few could: turn outrage into clarity, and clarity into something no one could deny. Jasmine stayed seated, not out of restraint, but out of resolve. Her stillness spoke louder than Candace's storm. Cameras kept rolling, but Jasmine wasn't performing. She wasn't there for the moment, she was there for the message. Her posture didn't shift. Her eyes didn't waver. She let the tension settle like dust in a courtroom after the final verdict. And without raising her voice, without standing at all, she made it clear. She wasn't backing down, because this seat, this voice was not borrowed. It was earned. And no outburst, no insult, no shaking finger would move her from it. "We don't want to stay angry. We just want to stop pretending it's over when it's not." Jasmine's words hung in the air like a courtroom gavel no one dared interrupt. She wasn't pleading. She wasn't persuading. She was stating the kind of truth that makes people squirm because it can't be argued with, only acknowledged. Her voice stayed calm, but there was weight behind every syllable, like she was speaking for every person who'd been told to move on while still bleeding. And for a flicker of a second, even Candace froze, not because she agreed, but because she knew the silence that followed meant the crowd did. Candace looked around, waiting for support. But this time, there was none. No nods, no smirks, just blank faces and eyes that had shifted. The audience wasn't leaning toward her anymore. They were leaning in to listen, not to defend. The echo chamber had cracked, and what spilled out was discomfort, not applause. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Her usual rhythm, the confidence, the snapbacks, it faltered. Because deep down, even she could feel it. The room had changed. Not because of volume, not because of outrage, but because truth, when delivered without fear, doesn't need backup. It stands on its own. The audience didn't move. No gasps, no outbursts. Just that thick, charged stillness that happens when everyone realizes they're witnessing something real. Not a debate, not a performance, but a moment of reckoning. Jasmine didn't raise her voice, but her words still echoed like a bell ringing down the spine. Candace, for all her sharpness, looked suddenly fragile-like, someone who thought they had the upper hand until the truth pulled the ground out from under them. And in that silence, the power shifted not with a mic drop, but with quiet conviction that couldn't be spun, dodged, or dismissed. Jasmine looked at her one last time, not with anger, not with triumph, just with a clarity that cut deeper than any insult could. Her eyes didn't flinch. They didn't gloat. They simply held Candace there, right therein, the discomfort of being seen. All the branding, the talking points, the deflections, they had no power in that stare. It was the kind of look that said, "I see the part of you you try to bury." And in that moment, Candace wasn't the loudest voice on the stage anymore. She was the one being asked to reckon with herself. You overcame. Good. So help someone else do the same. Don't pull the ladder up behind you. Her words didn't shout, they landed. Heavy. Final. Like a verdict that couldn't be appealed. The room didn't erupt. It inhaled. Because in that single sentence, Jasmine didn't just respond, she reframed the whole conversation. She didn't scold or shame. She offered a challenge wrapped in grace. And the power of it wasn't in the volume. It was in the truth no one could run from, especially not Candace. Candace opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her confidence, once sharp and unshakable, flickered. The cameras were still rolling, the crowd still watching, but the weight of Jasmine's words hung too heavy to push through. You could see it not just in her silence, but in her eyes. That moment of realization, that crack in the armor, not defeat, not quite, but exposure. She hadn't lost an argument. She'd been asked to face herself, and there was no script for that. The camera zoomed in on Jasmine. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. Her face stayed firm, focused not with pride, but with purpose. It wasn't about the win. It wasn't about the silence across from her. It was about truth finally being louder than spin. Her eyes held the room now, not because she demanded it, but because she'd earned it. She wasn't there for applause. She was there to remind everyone watching that clarity can cut deeper than cruelty, and sometimes the sharpest clapback is simply not backing down. She wasn't smiling, not because she wasn't proud, but because the moment wasn't for celebration. It was for clarity. Her expression said everything. This wasn't about a viral moment or a trending clip. It was about all the people who never got the mic, all the ones dismissed, silenced, or told to get over it. Jasmine wasn't performing. She was holding space. And that silence, that stillness, it wasn't empty. It was full of truth, weight, and everything Candace couldn't answer. She wasn't smug. There was no gloating, no victory lap, no pointed stare to soak in the spotlight. Jasmine sat there steady, not because she had won an argument, but because she had honored something deeper. She didn't need applause. She didn't need a mic drop. She had spoken not for the cameras, but for every person who ever felt dismissed by someone who used to understand. The power wasn't in how she said it. It was in the fact that she didn't flinch when it mattered most. She just looked done. Not the kind of done that comes from defeat, but the kind that's born from exhaustion. From carrying too many conversations where truth gets twisted and pain gets politicized. Her eyes weren't angry. They were tired. Tired of being asked to prove what should already be obvious. Tired of watching survivors get shamed by those who should know better. Tired of circling the same debate with people who once stood in her shoes but now pretend the floor doesn't even exist. And Candace? She stood frozen, mic still clipped, eyes darting not with fury, but with something quieter, something colder, doubt. For a moment, she wasn't the firebrand commentator. She wasn't the sharp-tongued debater. She was just a woman being reminded of a past she buried and a present she refused to acknowledge. Her hands dropped to her sides. The studio buzz faded behind her. And in that silence, with no script to reach for, she looked small, not defeated, just exposed. She looked like someone who just realized the truth had walked in, and this time, it wasn't leaving. It stood there in Jasmine's voice, in the crowd's silence, in every word that echoed louder than applause ever could. It didn't yell, it didn't boast, it didn't need to. It just stood calm, relentless, undeniable. And Candace, for all her preparation, for all the walls she'd built with arguments and charm, had no defense against it. Because the truth didn't come to debate. It came to stay.